Hello, everyone, and welcome to SD Spooky Adventures, where we discuss everything paranormal. We're your hosts. I'm Janine Haynes, and this is.
Michelle Myers, and today we're going to be talking about shadow figures and shadow people. Janine, what is your thought on this topic? Is this something that you've ever experienced?
So, yes, I do believe that they're out there. I have had plenty of experiences in my own home and other places that we've investigated where I've experienced shadow people, shadow figures firsthand.
Yeah, I've seen them on investigations, but I'm actually very glad to say I've never witnessed them in my home. I know some people think they're bad, some people think they're benign, but no, thank you. Do not come into my home. Thank you very much.
I think we'd all agree it's best to try to keep the spirits and things out of our home and, visit them when we do our investigations.
Yeah, well, what's your first encounter with shadow figures?
So I was living in a house for 20 years over in the Spring Valley area, and pretty regularly I would see what looked like a man moving from our master bedroom through the hallway and just kind of standing at the doorway of our kids' rooms. So
Oh
you can
wow.
imagine, single mom at this point, my ex-husband has moved out. I'm terrified. So I grab my baseball bat, pull it out from underneath the couch, and I'm gonna go find out who's inside my house. After searching everywhere under beds, in closets, I did realize that whatever I saw wasn't solid. It wasn't a human like living. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe because I am alone, it is dark, I'm imagining things. But a few weeks later, my kids were back at the house. They'd just gotten back from a 2 week vacation with their dad. And as we're watching TV, my oldest son sees this figure move from my bedroom and towards his bedroom. And he does the exact same thing I did. He grabs the baseball bat and he's looking to go find who's in the house. We're actually able to capture that day a photo in the bedroom of a very large orb, which we think was how that figure had manifested into our photo.
Wow, that's scary to me. And I mean, I will go into any investigation, and usually we're chasing after a spirit or entities, right? But in my own home, I mean, that's your space. That's supposed to be your safe space, especially when it comes to kids. Just yeah, no, again, no thanks. Yeah, my first, I guess I don't know if you could say encounter, but really the first time that this type of thing was put on my radar is when actually I was pretty young, maybe 7, 8, 9. I don't remember exactly, but I remember very specifically. Like I remember it so specifically. We were over. I was with my mom and dad, and we were visiting some of their friends. You know how it is when you're a kid. Like parents friends have kids, you're their kids, so let's put the kids together and they can have fun. So I was playing with this other girl about my age at the time, and we're just talking, and she starts telling me about how at night she sees these like dark faceless men in her room, around her bed and around her window. Now we were too young to know these terms like shadow figures or shadow people. I remember it very clearly, and she was very, very frightened. And she would tell her parents, but her parents would just brush it off. And I remember it so succinctly because just how scared and desperate she was. I mean, so desperate. She's going to tell anyone. She's telling me. I guess became her confidant, and that always stuck with me. And then it was later on in life when I became, aware of shadow figures and saw some myself during investigations that that really resonated, and I clicked. It's like, wow, this poor kid was experiencing this and no one was believing her.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing that happens. I think more people than not have probably seen a shadow figure, a shadow person in their lifetime. That little thing that you see move past you to the corner, and when you turn and look, it's not there, being like a visual disturbance or something that could be causing that. But sometimes it's just not. We do have a house that's up in an area called Heritage Park in our Old Town San Diego area. where there is a predominant shadow figure that wanders that property. And I will, a little bit later on in the video, attach a copy of him that was captured on video. Now, this shadow figure, as you said, it's faceless, but he does appear to be wearing what looks like a fedora cap on his head. So it's just this shadow shape. He's pretty dark too, almost pitch black. Now, with that, you were saying how scared she was. Well, people say that when they come across what they call the Watcher, which is this shadow figure, they become very paranoid. That fight or flight kicks in, and most people actually have to leave the vicinity. They feel so uncomfortable. So I do actually have a video of him walking past me while I was actually giving a tour to a group of college students that I will add to the video a little bit later on. But I do feel like that might be why some people believe that they could be evil, because a lot of times people do get that uneasy paranoia, fight or flight instinct kicking in when they experience these figures.
First day, you know, mom and dad don't usually give good enough allowance, so he was going to have his own spending money now, right? So he's working and he gets his.
Well, the guy with the hat, that reminds me of doing an investigation at the 10th Street Theater downtown, which is one of our favorite places to visit. And some of our team members actually also reporting seeing a shadow figure wearing a hat. So it kind of makes you think of like when these might date back to, you know, when men wore hats all the time. I think it's interesting that that gets captured, you know, in their manifestation. But I remember doing an investigation at a cemetery here in San Diego, an older one that has some prominent families buried there. And our teams were split up into a couple of groups, and we had walkies with us so we could stay in contact. And looking up the hill and seeing what I thought was one of our other team members walking down towards us, because it was definitely, you know, the shape of a man, no light penetrated it, you know, full on. And we got on the walkie and asked, like, okay, oh, who's that coming down towards us? The whole other team was up there. It wasn't anyone. And the shadow figure sat behind a tree. And one of the team members within my group ran out to see what it was. And it was no one, not a person. And if it had been, you know, someone else on the grounds, we would definitely have seen them, you know, leave the spot. But another one really notable was an investigation we were doing along Proctor Valley Road, which is located in South Bay, San Diego, in the Chula Vista area. Now, Proctor Valley Road is part dirt road. It used to always be dirt road, but it's part dirt road, and part of it's paved and sits sort of like in a little valley or ravine behind a lot of, you know, built up planned houses. And we were investigating down along that road. And again, in two teams, my group saw this really big, burly looking outline of a guy, looked like a linebacker, walking down the road towards us, approaching us. But then as it got closer, it dissipated. But we all saw it, we all reacted to it. And then maybe like 30 seconds later, the other team again split up farther up the road, started running down towards us. They had seen it or something like it heading in our direction from the opposite way, and they had run towards it. So we really had like 8 at least people, maybe 10 of us in 2 different groups seeing it. So in neither case did I feel threatened or anxious, because again, kind of in both cases, we thought that they were actual real, you know, corporeal people heading towards us, only to discover they weren't. So both pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'd say most of my experiences have been pretty either playful or kind of, you know, like just messing around or doing their own thing, right? So nothing that made us feel alerted in any way. Pioneer Park here in San Diego has a ton of shadow people that you can see pretty late at night, kind of moving around. And a big section of that cemetery is actually where they have the children buried. Now, on investigation, we've actually had one of my children, when he was about 15, out there pretending to play hide and go seek with the shadow people, who eventually did capture an EVP that made us believe that the shadow people were actually out there playing hide and seek with him. But in our photos, we've actually captured during that time what looks like a young man's shadow figure, maybe the age of 8 or 9, peeking out from behind a tree like he was hiding. Definitely not something that I would be fearful of. But in some cultures, they have what they believe these shadow figures are, and they're attached to sleep paralysis. So people will get the sleep paralysis, they'll be laying there and they feel like they literally can't move.
Yeah.
And when they open their eyes and they're looking around, they have made claims of seeing like a shadowy like figure in the room with them. Some claim that it's pitch black. Others have claimed that it's shades of gray. It all just kind of varies from person to person. But some of the religions do connect that to what they call the jinn. So we can probably go into the jinn on another episode, but it is like a creature or a shadow figure type thing that can change its shape at will. And it's not considered to be evil or good, but it is created by the good and bad that we do. So almost like it's a karmic manifestation of what we've done in our lives.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you mentioned the speech paralysis, because I think that's something that a lot of people use to discredit shadow people. 'Cause they say that, we're in that half awake, half asleep state. So it's like we're mentally waking up, but our body is still, in a sense, asleep. So while we're sort of, in a sense, mentally trying to get up, our body is still locked down just by the nature of, coming out of that state. So a lot of people kind of use that to question whether they're real. So it's sort of up for debate. You know where I stand.
Yeah.
I'm open to all things, but I've heard people use that specifically to dismiss the idea of shadow figures because, like you said, so many times you get those going hand in hand. So is it our imagination or is it really a force holding us down? Another aspect of the shadow figure I think is interesting is a lot of times you'll hear people reporting that they have glowing red eyes. Now, I haven't experienced that in any of my encounters with shadow figures, but how about you?
So luckily, no, I've not experienced that. No glowing red eyes for me, but I have actually had one experience in that same Pioneer Park where we're doing an investigation. It was actually live on one of the Facebook pages that we were following. And one of our gentlemen investigators was with me. We saw what looked like a vortex kind of open up in front of this very large tree that's in the park area. And that vortex was like super black. So we're just in this black hole. And inside this black hole, both of us see an even darker black figure of a very large male kind of watching us from inside. Now, in this moment, all of a sudden, we could feel the wind swirling around us. It was actually very difficult for both of us to stay on our feet. We felt like we were going to be knocked over. It's almost like being in like a tropical storm or something. And what's interesting is the swirling of the air was actually captured on the video for the people watching us live. And that does lend to a little bit more of where I could see people would find them to be scary, evil, or maybe just something you don't want to mess with, because that day we didn't feel safe at all.
Speaking of Pioneer Park, I think we'll have to do a whole episode on that location because I know we've had some interesting experiences there and even talked to some police officers who patrol it. I don't know if you were on that one
I
with me.
was.
Okay, and some of their experiences. I don't want to give too much away because I think that could be a whole standalone episode, that location and why it's so dynamic. But fortunately, no, like I said, most of my encounters with them have been pretty benign, fortunately. But again, something I'd like to see out on investigations, not so much in my own house.
Definitely. Now, for you, have you seen the different variation of shades like other people have claimed, like the lighter shadows to the darker shadows, or just the pretty dark ones? What have you seen?
Yeah, I have not really gray, but I would say more the density, different than density, where a couple where we thought maybe they were, actually people walking towards us. I mean, they were that dark against, the night background and there was movement of them. It wasn't just like they didn't look flat. They actually looked like they had shape to them too, like three-dimensional, where typically when I think of shadow figures, I almost think of them as being sort of like a flat paper cutout, but these had looked like they had like they were dense and again kind of a like a 3D image, but the ones where you know see them just kind of out of the corner of your eye fleeting here and there. I've come across those too during investigations, and they're almost more like a shadow you see in the, you know, early evening, late afternoon, where it's, I guess maybe that could be a shade of gray, but like you can kind of almost transparent. So they definitely come in all shapes and densities.
Now, there are other people who do believe that sometimes when we're seeing these shadow figures, it's just a manifestation of spirit coming through, depending on their energy level. Where if it's stronger energy, able to pull enough energy or has been around long enough, it would look solid like you and myself. And then as it looks a little bit more thin or opaque, that maybe it's not had enough energy to draw to fully manifest at that time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, you hear a lot of times people talk about like the veil, like the veil is thinner at what like midnight or early morning, and that's why we might see more spirit activity during that time. And it kind of makes me think of like if you think of like the veil is almost like a real physical barrier, like you said, like it's almost like someone walking up to it, like if you were had like a thin curtain between you and someone else, and like behind you, like you know, walking up to it but not through it, so you kind of see that outline. Maybe they don't have that energy to kind of quite break through or don't know how to quite break through to our side.
That's a very great description of it because that definitely encompasses everything that I kind of think that I couldn't put into words. So I love that description. Perfect. Well, whether you believe in shadow figures or not, they have been prominent in many cultures and religions for years, including the Native American. So we would like to know what our guests believe about shadow figures. Have you had your own experiences, that type of thing? If you have, go ahead and throw them into the comments. If you want to be a guest on our show, also let us know what topic you would like to hear us talk about, and you may want to come on and discuss with us. We are definitely looking for guests to come on with us.
Absolutely. We love hearing firsthand stories, and I know our audience would too. All right, Janine. Well, I think that pretty much wraps us up. As we do you want to close this out and let people know where they can find us?
So check us out on YouTube under SD Spooky Adventures. We also have a Facebook page and a TikTok also under SD Spooky Adventures.
All right. Well, Janine, it was great talking to you, and I look forward to our next episode.
Thank you, Michelle. Everybody stay spooky.